won't go in.
Me and Alf are going to show you how to make a round cushion cover. I'm going to show you how to make a round cushion cover. This is Canadian smocking, and I've no idea what the design's actually called, but it looks like barley to me, or I'm going to call it barley. Round cushion cover, a lot easier to make than you would actually think. The first thing we need to do is to measure the size of your cushion and work out the amount of fabric that you need. I'm going to measure my cushion first of all, and from side to side in inches measures 18 inches across, and I've measured all the way around already and it's 44 inches, and I've already worked out that the piece of fabric therefore that I need is going to measure 24 inches across and 56 inches in length, and that allows for the shrinkage as you start to smock it. So what I need to do now is to mark out my squares, my guideline. I'm going to leave 6 inches blank at either end. So 1, 2, 3, 4, thank you. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 inches here. And I'm marking this on the back of the fabric. Now I'm using a blue fabric, although I'm making my cushion in gold, because you can see clearer where I'm marking here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And these are the two sides that are going to fold over onto both sides of the cushion. You'll see that in just a second. Hello. Oh, I'm not comfy. Okay. So I'll start at one end. And this is only rough because, as in the measurements on the side, because you won't see this from the front. So I'm going to draw 1 inch squares by drawing across, move my ruler up, and these clear rulers are brilliant because you can line them up perfectly with the line that you've just drawn and just go across. And I need to do this the whole of the way down that 56 inches of fabric. And I'm using a biro, not a disappearing pen, because you're not going to see this on the reverse, and I don't want it disappearing before I finish sewing it, because I may want to put this down in stop-start. So you get the idea there. That's 1 inch stripes that I'm leaving. And then I'll go over the whole lot again in the opposite direction, but I'm going to do the lengthwise one. So I'm just going to line up my fabric against the grid on my mat to make sure that I'm starting off straight. So there's my 6 inch mark, and then again I'm just going to mark 1 inch grids until the whole of my area is covered in squares.
Won't go in.
Me and Alf are going to show you how to make a round cushion cover. I'm going to show you how to make a round cushion cover. This is Canadian smocking, and I've no idea what the design's actually called, but it looks like barley to me, or I'm going to call it barley. Round cushion cover, a lot easier to make than you would actually think. The first thing we need to do is to measure the size of your cushion and work out the amount of fabric that you need. Now the next stage, when I've got all of my grids drawn onto the fabric, is to transfer my pattern. I'll take a photograph of the pattern and put it onto the end of this video, so bear with me. And I've just marked diagonally in these repeated patterns the design that eventually, when it's sewn up, will make up the barley effect. So I'm going to start at the end. My first square. It doesn't matter that the lines have overlapped, you won't see the grid, but I'm basically starting and finishing within that 12 inch section here, so I've got 12 squares, and I need to mark, according to my pattern, diagonally that way and then that way, and these are the stitches that I'm going to pick up in just a second. So this is quite easy once you get into the flow of it. Just keep marking out those arrow shapes, and then I'll go on to the next section. I need to miss a row And then on my next one I start two boxes down and do the same design. And this is important because this really will affect the way that your pattern looks when it's finished. So again, just diagonally from one side to the other. This is where I'm going to sew. And you carry on all the way down that 56 inches. 1, 2 missing, and then the same again. You won't see these, remember, when it's all sewn together, so as long as you know which boxes are marked and which diagonals they are, that's fine. And then 1, 2 missing, and I've got an even amount of spaces there. Because I've got 12 boxes, 12 sections, it works out evenly, so I don't have half a section left over at the end. And all the way down again, you carry on doing that until you've finished the whole section. And then you're left with this, this grid, which looks quite complicated, but it's not. This is the bit where we start to sew together. So, take your thread. Don't need the ruler anymore. And I'm going to start one box in because I'll need a seam allowance. So the first thing to do is to tie off your thread by just sewing over a few times, well, 3 times say. And then follow the line that you've drawn. So I'm going to pick up the opposite diagonal, pull it back to the first side and pull that up so it folds over together, and then sew over 3 or 4 times just to make that secure. I don't want this to come undone because once this cushion's made up I don't want that cover to come off again. So I'm going to thread the needle through, then thread it through the loop to make a knot, and I've done that a couple of times to make it really secure. Then I'm going to go across to the second section here, leave that thread loose, secure this thread, go over to the second corner of my diagonal line and pull those 2 sides together, and do the same again. I'll just put a couple of stitches in there and then a knot just to make sure the stitches don't come undone, and then carry on to the next side here. So I'm keeping again that thread quite loose, that's not important at all. Tie this off so that the thread doesn't pull through. Over to the second diagonal, back to the first, and pull those 2 together and tie it off. And knot. I'll just do one more, and then you carry on all the way down the first section, then come back up the second section, miss the gap where you've got no lines at all. It's only where those diagonal lines are that you need to join them together. So I'm going across this side, leaving that one loose. That stitch isn't important at all. To the diagonal, back again, and sew those pieces together. Now you'll start to see uniformity as the stitches come together, and just check every now and again your design as it starts to appear on the other side, because that's quite exciting when you see it coming together. So I'll carry on and do a few more stitches now, and I'll show you how it's coming on in just a second. So again, just quickly, I'll show you one more diagonal. Secure your thread over to the other side of the diagonal line, pull it across and tie it off. Now to do the whole section took me about 3 hours, so it's not a quick process, but that's what it's all about. So if I just take that thread off, I'll show you what it's starting to look like on the other side. You can see from the reverse already you've got this uniform kind of stripe starting to appear. So if you do get any of the stitches wrong or your diagonal lines aren't in the right place, you'll know instantly that because it stands out. And as I turn that over, even though I've only done a small section now, you can start to see those like V shapes of the corn cobs coming together. Now carry on doing that for the whole of that section, the 12 inches across, the 56 inches in length, until you've got something that looks like this. So this is the one that I'm actually going to make my cushion cover from. So you can see I've got my 3 lines, all uniform. The way that the folds are created means that you don't actually see the stitches underneath there. Use the same colour thread just in case, but you shouldn't see any stitches. And if I just show you what that looks like from the back, you can see that even kind of stripe with the zigzag, so that you know all of the stitches are fine. If you find that some of the stitches that are connecting, if you like, are a little bit too tight, then you can just cut through those, because you've knotted and you've stitched so well that that shouldn't come undone at all. Now the next thing to do is to fold this over lengthwise in half with the right sides together, and I'm going to machine stitch the edges together here. Now where the pleats are, I want to keep the pleats there, if you like. So as the pleat forms, I'm going to put a pin in those sections and just sew straight across and sew the 2 end bits together. And then I'll have a tube to put around my cushion. So now I've got my tube, it's time to put my pillow pad inside here. And I'll need to insert it and then tip it so that my quilted section goes all the way around the edge. Now the nice thing with both having a pillow, because it's soft, and the way that the quilting works means that it's quite stretchy, so it's quite forgiving as you put your cushion inside. So I'll fold over the bottom section and we'll start on the top here, because I want this to be really neat. Now you can see the folds again all the way around where your smocking's been, and it almost starts to form its own creases, if you like. So all I'm going to do is to pull in every one of those folds evenly into the centre, and I'll gather up a few like that and then just pop a pin through them to hold them in place. And then carry on until they're nice and even all the way around before I start to put a stitch in them. So again, they sit on top, because the centre part where it all comes together I just want to hide with a big button. So I want that to be easy to conceal, so I'll just carry on with this all the way around, hiding the seam that I've made underneath one of the folds so you don't see the seam there. There's another one. Put it quite tight, and all of this spiral should eventually just sit in the centre. And if it doesn't look right at this point, we're only pinning, so you can always undo that and start again. Now it's starting to get quite bulky now, so I'll pin it separately, but I'm going to go around with a hand needle and thread in just a second and neaten that off. So I'm just doing 3 or 4 sections at a time. Pull it into the centre and pop a pin in there. My centre doesn't look very neat at the moment, but it will do when I start hand sewing that and putting it together permanently. So I've kind of got the, and it's not perfect now, I've got the gist of that. I know where all of those seams are going to fall. The most important thing is the way that it sits around the edge, and those are all nice and even, so that's good. So what I'm going to do now is to take a needle and thread, and I'm going to tack as close as I can to the edge all of those pieces together all the way around, and then just draw that up into the centre. Now I'm using a buttonhole thread, which is stronger because I don't want this to break as I'm going round, And all you see I'm doing, I've gradually undone the pins, but I've kept the creases in there, and I'm taking the crease and I'm back stitching it to the crease previous. So take that crease, pull it together, back stitch, hold it in place. And then this is my next section that I've pinned. So again, I'm going to take the first one. I'll take my pin out now, and my fabric stayed creased. I know where I'm going with it. There's no reason why you can't go back and repin if you need to, if you lose your creases. And remember, it's only sewing, so if it doesn't quite look right when you've finished the whole circle, then you can simply undo it and start again. I'm trying to keep my stitches quite close to the edge, because again I'm going to cover this up with a button, so I don't want to see any stitching on the finished side of it. So I'll just carry on doing this all the way around, and then the same on the other side, so that it's equal on both sides. So again, just taking the pleat, you can see now I've even taken the pins out as I'm going around, the pleat stay there, and back stitch into the previous pleat. And useful having that really strong thread as well. I don't want this to break. If you don't have buttonhole thread or a stronger thread, then just double up on the thread that you're using. And that's my final one. This is the second side I'm just finishing off, so it's a little bit tighter because the cushion cover is getting a bit snug. Now I'm left with a big hole in the centre, and I don't want a big hole, so before I snip my thread, I'm just going to draw the two sides together and put a stitch over there, and then go on through it. You may need a thimble at this point, and then go back to the other side and close that hole over. And you can do this as many times as you like, just to close the hole, don't you, Alfie? Like so. Make that as small as you can, and then it certainly won't be seen from behind the button. So that will do for me now. And you can go over this from one direction to another until the hole's closed, because you won't see this in just a second. Now before I sew the button on, I want to draw in the two sides of the cushion itself. So you see I've got, that's nice and neat on the one side. I've already done the previous side and I've drawn that hole in together, but what I want to do is to join the two together, so I'm giving some dimension, some shape to the cushion. So now I've got my blooming big needle, a longer needle as you can possibly get, and tie a knot in one end, and I've got that really strong thread again, the buttonhole thread, and I've doubled it over, and I'm going to go straight in this side all the way through the centre of the cushion and aim so I come out on the other side, like so. Oops, need a bigger knot in there. it may well pull through. Let's tie a bigger knot. And that should do it. So again, straight through the centre. This is why I need a long needle, because I don't want it to get lost in the middle of the cushion. Out through the other side here. That's it, and secure. Then I'm going to go back again and do this a few times just to make sure that your thread stays in place before you even think about sewing the button on the top. The button's just cosmetic, it's not holding it in place. So you can see my cushion starting to take shape now. I think one more should about do it. So back through again, pull that through, and then one final pull through that side. There. And just, I know it's a bit fiddly, but I do need to tie that knot off. Just like you would do with a smaller needle and thread, so just make a loop, pull it through, and do that a couple of times. There we go, through the centre, and pull through it. When that's nice and tight, snip it off, very close to the centre. There. And now it's ready to put my button on. And what I've done with my buttons is actually put 3 together, and these have got 4 holes in the centre, and I've already tied them off so that they stay together, and that's just going to sit in the centre. But now that's nice and tight, I can use a smaller needle, a narrower needle, and just attach my button to the centre of each side. And there you go with the button sewn on in the centre of both sections, and it looks really nice and neat and unusual and retro, and would make an amazing wedding gift for somebody, I think.